has halved and unemployment has surged. Is this what the Prime Minister meant when he tweeted that the economy is improving? Yes. 2 weeks ago, he was crowing about his historic trade deal and how he got 0% tariffs on steel. Now the steel industry will face 25% tariffs unless he does exactly what President Trump tells him to. It is chaos, chaos, chaos.
We're the only country in the world that isn't paying the 50% tax on steel. Coming down. We are working on it to bring it down to zero. That is going to happen.
Order. Please, let's listen to the answer, even if you don't believe you're getting one. It is how the Prime Minister wishes to.
Everything he has said this afternoon is total nonsense. Obfuscation, avoiding the question. He doesn't have any answers. It's disgraceful.
It's been opposed by our adversaries, Russia, China and Iran. And into that column we have reform, presumably following Putin, and the Tories following reform.
In the unfolding political drama, the belief that Britain had moved beyond the battles of Brexit has proven premature. While many assumed the public had long since shifted its attention, tensions were quietly rising behind the scenes, and they have now erupted into what the storyline casts as the year's most explosive scandal. According to this narrative, a dramatic confrontation takes place within the royal halls of Buckingham Palace. In a rare departure from his traditionally apolitical posture, the king is depicted as quietly blocking a discreet, EU-focused meeting reportedly orchestrated by Starmer's inner circle. But the real shock within the story comes from whom he is said to receive instead, Nigel Farage. Once written off by political elites and mocked by commentators, Farage is portrayed as returning to the centre of the stage, unexpected, uninvited, and unmistakably influential. In this dramatised account, his re-emergence signals not just a comeback, but a direct challenge to the political establishment, one delivered with the force of someone who has no intention of fading quietly into the background.
You know what he's got, Andrew? He's got non-player character energy. Do you know what that means?
No.
NPC. Unfortunately, it's NPC is non-player character. Main player character is your charismatic leader with loads of riz. He's not got that.
He is a charisma bypass.
In this unfolding political drama, the contrast could not be sharper. While Starmer is portrayed as working behind closed doors to edge Britain back toward Brussels, Farage is depicted standing firm in the King's presence, a quiet moment carrying an unmistakable message. In the narrative, the symbolism is clear. Brexit remains a defining force, and any attempt to reverse it in the shadows would face a direct challenge. This is presented not as a routine dispute, but as a dramatic intervention, one with the potential to shift the entire political landscape. For months, unease within Westminster had been building. Whispers, fragmentary reports, and discreet meetings all suggested something more coordinated beneath the surface, an effort to soften, if not fully unwind, Britain's break from the European Union. At the centre of this storyline is Keir Starmer. Publicly committed to respecting the will of the electorate, he is depicted behind the scenes as pursuing a very different course. According to senior insiders within the narrative, Starmer and his closest advisers engaged in private discussions with EU figures, laying the foundations for a quiet return to European influence. No press statements, no parliamentary scrutiny, only late-night conversations, closed-door negotiations, and draft proposals that never reach the public domain.
It's very good he's standing in for the member for Clacton, I have to say. There was no sign of him yesterday at the EU state. He was the first through the E-gates, somewhere to south of France. Nice work if you can get it.
The plan was sweeping in scope. It aimed to restore free movement for EU citizens, surrender key regulatory controls over trade and migration, and realign Britain's borders with Brussels, all without public scrutiny. A silent reversal of Brexit, carried out without Parliament's consent and without a single word to the Crown, bold, secretive, and ultimately destined to unravel. But no covert strategy remains hidden forever. Fragmented emails, quiet tips, and unexplained meetings began to surface. Journalists closed in, And in this narrative, those murmurs eventually reached Buckingham Palace. A king who typically remains above the political fray was now paying close attention. What he saw, according to the story, was an effort to circumvent the referendum, an attempt to redirect Britain's future without a mandate from the public. It wasn't simply controversial. It threatened the constitutional balance itself. This was no longer about political tactics, it was about sovereignty. In the dramatized account, the king felt compelled to act. He gathered his senior advisors and prepared to intervene. But he needed a voice, someone willing to challenge Starmer's strategy directly. Someone still seen by the public as a defender of the referendum result. And in this storyline, that call went to Nigel Farage. Dismissed for years as a relic of previous political battles, he was now portrayed as the one figure summoned to the palace. He arrived quietly, no press, no entourage, carrying a folder said to contain the evidence, documents, communications, and details of Starmer's alleged private contacts with EU officials. Draft proposals developed without oversight. Promises made outside parliamentary authority. In the narrative, the king reached his conclusion quickly. Farage, the face of Brexit, had returned to stop what he viewed as a betrayal. The briefing left little ambiguity. Starmer, it suggested, was not merely exploring policy, he was orchestrating an unannounced return to EU governance without the consent of the public. The king's response, as the story presents it, was direct. This ends now. No address to the nation, no public statement, just decisive action behind closed doors. And with it, the quiet strategy that had moved through government corridors was halted by the only authority capable of stopping it. But this was about more than one meeting. It was portrayed as a stand for democratic principle. No hidden agreement, no private negotiation would be allowed to overturn a national vote. By dawn, word had spread. Something significant had taken place inside the palace. And at the centre of the storm stood Farage, no longer a sideline commentator, but the man said to have delivered the briefing that changed everything. Headlines surged, social media erupted. Across Britain, a single question echoed. What did they uncover? Starmer remained silent, but silence offered no protection. The momentum had shifted. Farage was suddenly a central figure, again energised, amplified, impossible to ignore. Starmer, meanwhile, appeared increasingly cornered. As leaks multiplied, Starmer's grip weakened. The public, already weary of political doublespeak, sensed something was wrong. And in this heightened drama, Starmer was depicted as facing a convergence of pressures from the king, from Farage, and from a public demanding clarity. Inside Downing Street, the atmosphere soured. When word reached Starmer that the king had intervened, he reportedly refused to believe it. Confirmation arrived quickly. Not only had the palace halted his alleged EU strategy, but Farage had been brought into the discussion. Starmer's reaction, in the dramatised version, was immediate panic. Advisors were summoned, calls raced to Brussels. The orders were frantic: contain the leak, bury the headlines, take control of the narrative. But the moment had already passed. Reporters were everywhere, whistleblowers were talking, and the plan conceived in secrecy and shielded from public view was now collapsing in the open. Inside, number 10, the crisis had moved from serious to existential.